Well, tonight we're going to look at our Grasshopper. This is a 727 with a Kawasaki motor, and I think it's a 61-inch deck. We bought it over at Benton, Illinois, the FB McAfoose in '06. So this is the 14th year, and this has been mowing two places all those years. Mows the in-laws' place and our place over at the farm. Anyway, it's got two-cylinder V-twin Kawasaki engine in there. When we first got it, one little trouble we had was the fan blade in there started shedding fins right at, when we were first using it. And McAfoose gave us a new fan blade. We put that on. Never have had another bit of trouble with that. A couple of years ago, we had to change the muffler. The muffler, the pipes going into the muffler parted from the weld. And let's see, 2 years ago, the electric clutch down there failed. And that's something to think about. It's got 900 hours now in its 14th year. And the electric clutch is down here when you pull the knob to kick in the deck. There's an electric clutch in there, and the bearing, this bearing on the back end of it, went out. So we're kind of remembering that. That went out like in its 12th year. So that's a sealed bearing. You can't grease that. Anyway, every time you use it, you're supposed to grease it like every 4 hours. Some of the bearings say 8 hours, some of them 4 hours. We just grease it every 4 hours. Once in a blue moon, we've let it go 8 hours between greasings, but usually it's 4. We keep a book in the little side pocket, and we write down our hours every time we run it. You grease those two back wheels. There's a jack shaft in there. You see the two belts way down there. There's a bearing in front of that. You grease that every time. And on the front, I come around to the front, that jack shaft comes out right there. We got a U-joint there, and there's a bearing at the end of that shaft right behind that U-joint. And that thing is a little bit hard to get. You have to get down on your knees. You have to prop up your footboard, get down on your knees, and wipe that off and get a grease gun on. It just takes one shot of grease. It's a little roller bearing in there. It doesn't take much grease, but you do it every time. And then the slip shaft on the drive shaft there, you grease it every time. And then you've got your spindles. This thing's zooming by itself for some reason. You got a spindle, one in the center there on the left, one on the middle, and one over there on the far side. That's where your cutting happens. And those take a lot of grease. I grease those 13, 14 strokes every 4 hours. And the reason we're shooting this video is this week one of the spindles went bad. And this one here, when we fired it up, we could hear it. There, you can hear that. And that had been kept greased, but that one on the right, it's on the right side of the machine, it takes the most abuse, and that bearings in that were going out. So we shut her down and checked it out, and went over to FB McAfoose with a list of things and came back with some parts. Anyway, so we changed that spindle and shiv. The shiv was going bad too, because the spindle had been working, that shiv was going bad. Changed that out, and changed out those two idlers there. I had changed the big one a few years back, and those are sealed bearings. The one in back, I hadn't changed it, but when the belt's off of it, you can turn that bearing. This is the old one, and when you put that on your finger and turn it, that bearing talks to you. It's just got little grabby places in it. So So I figured that one had spun twice as much as the big one, so we changed it. We've got one more we didn't change on the tension arm. Didn't change it, it feels okay. It looks like it's the same as that old one we took off. I think it is. And I'm going to re-grease the bearing in that. I'll have it for a spare. And then we put a new belt on it. Now, the thing it's been a good machine. It's got over 900 hours on it. The thing that's always bugged me about this machine is underneath this shiv right here. That's your drive shiv that runs the deck. You've got this gearbox. This gearbox sits down underneath, and the drive shaft powers this, and the shiv sits up on top of this, and it sits down underneath that deck, totally wrapped up with a mounting plate and a skid plate around it, and you can't get to it to check the grease. Now it's got I had never seen it until today. It's got 2 plugs on each side, and it sits in the machine just like this. And anyway, so while we were getting our parts we knew were bad, I asked the parts guy if they have a recommendation on when that should be taken apart and checked, and he didn't have a recommendation. I said, well, it's got 900 hours, I've been using it 14 years, and I'm getting nervous about that gearbox. He said, I sell a lot of those gearboxes. So I thought, okay, we're going to change that gearbox. And we bought a replacement, and they recommended I check the grease level in it before I put it in. It was slightly under those plugs. It was less than half full, so I filled it up so it's a little over half full. And took out the old one, got that old one out, and I checked the grease in it, and there's barely enough grease to get it to dribble out of the plugs. It just had, if I'd run this another season, it was going to go out the next few times we ran it. So that's something to think about if you have a Grasshopper. 900 hours, that thing was basically out of grease. So I'm thinking every 200 hours, maybe 100 hours, maybe annually, but at least every 200 hours a person needs to take the skid plate off of that gearbox underneath, get in there and pull a plug out and top up your grease. It's no fun having a gearbox blow out on a machine when you're driving it. Things lock up, parts break, parts get thrown. And, I'm surprised that Grasshopper doesn't tell the owners in the manual to service that thing. You know, our owner's manual shows it, but they don't tell you to do anything with it. But that's always been on my mind every time I run it. When's that gearbox going to go dry? And it doesn't look like it's leaking, but you know, a little grease escapes through the seals. And 900 hours, that thing better be coming out and be in grease. So I'm just going to say every 200 hours a person needs to pop that out. But there's 4 bolts. There's 2 bolts here and 2 bolts underneath. You have to raise the deck to get under it. 4 bolts, and you can take off the skid plate that goes under it and up one side, and then you can access 2 of those grease plugs. And anyway, this machine has been really trouble-free. Motor still runs good except for the dead man switch. It has a dead man switch in that seat. Anyway, in the bottom of the seat there's a dead man switch, so if you raise up off of the seat while you have the deck running, the motor stops. And that's a big safety thing, because if you get off the mower with the deck running and put your foot in there, you're going to lose the end of your foot. So that's a big safety deal. Don't try to, you know, I guess some people might take that dead man switch off. We bought a new dead man switch. I can keep it running. If I make myself sit down really tight in that seat, it'll keep running for me. Susan gets on it and it sputters and pops all the time. She can't sit down tight enough in the seat to keep it running. So anyway, that's one more thing I got to change yet, and then we're ready to go back to mowing. So keep your oil checked, keep your antifreeze checked, buy clean fuel, grease that deck, and thank you for watching.